Hey everybody, it's Ben. Welcome to the recap of Game 8 of the World Championship. I see the people in the chat are pretty excited about stuff. This game was quite interesting. Probably had the most brilliant moves and the most blunders of any game. And yeah, it just makes me think that a lot of the previous World Championship matches, the people just played too boring. And, you know, they made sure they were always in control instead of making the game interesting and using their talent. But this World Championship, that's not happening. So we're seeing really exciting games. So this is like probably my favorite World Championship in quite a long time because the games are so interesting. And there was controversy that somebody who obviously shouldn't have found that there was an account on Lichess that was playing Ding's openings. So they assume it was Ding practicing a month before the match. That's when the games were played. Like when he played H3 on move 4, and this game when he played H4 at some point. So it looks like if they just look at all the games on the account, they'll see Ding's preparation. So, yeah, that's not a good idea. I'm not sure what they should do playing, you know, practice games. Probably just not on Lichess would be a good idea. And so forth. It could be Bill Belichick's fault, that's right. And so forth. Anyway, the game ended about 10 minutes ago, and they're having the press conference now. So let's look at the game. People were complaining on YouTube that when you guys sub or make some other noises where I'm getting paid, that it ruins the recap. So if you were one of those people complaining on YouTube, if you're listening now, please send me your address so I can mail you a bag of dicks. Okay. So Ding was white. This is game 8. Jan is up 4-3. And the last 4 games at least have been decisive. So let's look at this game. This game started as a Nimzo Indian. And Ding played a line that Fabiano seems to like that was popular in the 50s and 60s, but not so popular now. E3 and then A3. So typically, when you play the same-ish King's Indian, you know, when you play A3 early, yay, a noise, perfect. D-Rush98 subscribe, thank you. When you play Nimzo Indian with A3, you know, when it was invented, before you guys were born, the idea was after takes, we're going to play F3 and E4, and we're not going to play E3 first. So E3 and A3 is sort of mixing systems. And this was popular, you know, 70 years ago. Not very popular now. Okay, but Ding has a specific idea in mind. Okay, D6 was played. That's typical. Black wants to put pawns on the dark squares now that his dark square bishop is gone. And he likes to play C5 and E5 to blockade these pawns. So these double pawns don't get to move. Okay, knight E2. You could play knight F3 also, but the idea behind this specific line is to play knight E2, knight G3, and push all of our pawns everywhere. And the point of A3 is, you'll see later on, pretty soon. I don't want to give it away. Okay, so C5, knight G3, knight C6, and rook A2. And this rook A2 idea happens a lot in Nimzo Indians where white plays A3 pretty early. And what white wants to do is eventually get his rook over to the king side. And in some cases, even D2 or E2, depending on the position. Okay, so he played B6 because the bishop's not getting out that way. E4, bishop A6. typical idea of black is to play bishop here, knight a5, rook c8, and put pressure on the c pawn. And a lot of times, white sacrifices the c pawn so he can play on the king side while black's wasting time doing that. Okay, bishop g5, h6, and now in this position, Ding played h4, which is obviously home preparation, and it's the best move, so it makes sense. So this is quite a confusing point in the game. Geary thinks that Jan forgot his preparation. I don't know. It's hard to predict what opening will be played when a different opening is played every game. So obviously, if there was preparation for this position, I'm not saying there was, but if there was, then it was probably done a long time ago. It probably wasn't done yesterday, because Ding's played the London and Ding's played other stuff with white h3 early. So we have a different opening again in game 8. Then all 8 games have had different openings. So it's possible Jan never looked at this position. It's more likely he did. And it's 50-50 that Geary is correct. That Jan mixed up his preparation here. Okay, and what Jan did was fine. There's nothing wrong with what Jan did. But Geary thinks the reason Jan was confused is because he mixed up the moves. Now, the moves that were played are fine. Everything's fine. But I'll show you what Geary thought. So in the game, he took on g5. Sorry, I went slow and then fast. And then he played the move g6. And then after takes, e5, Jan went into a big think. Like, e5, what is this move? Okay, another Louis C.K. reference. What is this? Okay, so let's go back. What Geary thinks happened, okay, and I'm not saying it did, but Geary thinks it did, so he's better than me, is he thinks the preparation was to trade on d4, okay, takes, then take the knight, then play g6, then play queen takes. We have the exact same position as in the game, except these pawns aren't here. There's no c5 pawn and no c3 pawn. And in this position, the engine wants to play rook d2 defending the pawn, and the move e5 doesn't make any sense. Okay, because after e5, if you play the same way the game played, the same moves, after d5, and this is the game, except there were pawns here and here, now I have knight d4. Obviously, there's no white pawn on c3, so knight d4 is good, and black's just winning here. Black's a pawn up and better. It's just silly what white did. White just gave up a pawn in this whole center, and nothing's happening. Okay, so when e5 was played, Jan looked confused, according to Geary. Okay, and so the reason to be confused is e5 isn't a move if he had traded earlier, but now it's the normal move. Now it's the book move. So if e5 is the normal engine move, why is Jan confused? So Geary said Jan's confused because he had the position without the pawns in his prep, but he forgot to trade. Now, it doesn't mean that Jan made a mistake. It means that Jan forgot his prep. And he's played another line, which is also fine. But this is what Geary thinks that Jan was confused about. Because he said Jan shouldn't be confused. e5 is the engine move. Probably this is Ding's prep. Now let's go back. And you're like, why did black give his knight away? Well, I'm going to take the knight. And if you move your knight, it doesn't matter where you move it to. I play queen h5, and you will know Ding's name is the Lord when he checkmates you next move. So so taking and then g6 or g6 right, or this is fine. And you could even take on d4 twice. Now you have to take this. You can't take on d4 now because pawn's too strong. So In this position, Geary believes these two pawns aren't on the board in Jan's preparation, and Jan forgot to trade. That's what Geary thinks. The other possibility is Jan was just thinking for no reason. He already knew the position. And the other is Jan was out of prep earlier than the super GMs believe he was. I think Geary's explanation makes sense because Jan probably didn't look at this yesterday, and he probably forgot. He knew the line, but he forgot to insert CD. That seems like the most likely. Okay, so now I'm not saying Black made a mistake. Black didn't make a mistake. Black just isn't following his prep. Okay, so E5, you have to take. Okay, and then D5. In this position, some of the pundits were concerned that White would play knight e4 with this possible repetition, and the game would just end. And that would be boring. We don't want that. Now, Black doesn't have to repeat. Black can play queen f4, and there's super crazy lines here. One of them is bishop d3, bishop takes c4 because the bishop's defending the knight. So if bishop takes bishop, I can take the knight with check. g3, trying to get the queen off of the knight, so I can take this for free. So you have to play queen f5. And now the move f3, never play f3, which gives the rook away. Okay, and the reason we're giving the rook away is we want to play rook here winning. That's one of the reasons you play rook a2. So he has to take the rook, queen d2, and if I play queen h6, I win. There's nothing to do about queen h6. So Black only has one way not to lose here. Black's up a rook, but queen h6 is checkmate. So we got to do something about that. The only thing you can do is take and sacrifice your queen. And this line, which looks crazy and would never be played, is actually completely normal. The engine says it's equal. It says all those moves are good. And Geary and Hess and Tanya were looking at this. And, you know, if you don't know this position in advance, you really have no idea who's better. And it turns out the engine says nobody's better. The position is just sort of nonsensical. It's just a crazy position. And you could argue Black's king is open and White's going to mate him. Or you could argue Black's king isn't open and I have two rooks and two pawns for a queen. This pawn's attacked 700 times. Bishop's coming back to d5. So Black will win eventually. And the engine says it's equal. Okay. And that could have happened. That, you know. And they thought that might happen, that line, or the line with knight e4, queen f5, knight d6, perpetual on the queen. Luckily for everybody, Ding, Nepo, us, you know, people on SpaceX, d5 was played. And this gives the game a new character. White's trying to get it past d-pawn, and he's also going to attack the queen. Thanks, Funky Monk 50. You're the best. Now here Black has many moves. Knight a5, knight e7, either rook to d8. And probably they're all okay. What Jan did, the engine said is good. Played knight e7. That's fine. A lot of pressure on these pawns. Black's a pawn up. White's position looks sort of funky. But it turns out his position is funky. Okay, so he thought forever. And once again, this repetition is in the air if the players want it. Okay, Ding didn't want repetition. He played d6. The engine says that's the best. You can play knight c6 or knight f5. Knight f5 looks more natural because, you know, knight's over by the king. That looks good. Okay, knight e4. And now they'll move queen d8 because the knight was attacking the queen. So Black has a very simple plan. Black wants to play bishop b7, take the knight, and then take the pawn. Then Black's up two pawns. We've gotten rid of one of White's attackers, etc. White wants to checkmate Black on the king's side and queen his pawn. Those are his two ideas. and it's white to move. And of course, the engine says it's equal. So this is a great game so far because it's very double-edged. It's weird looking. And the engine says everything's equal. Nobody's done anything wrong. Now, if you're playing the game, you don't know that. You don't have lots of grandmasters analyzing and engines telling you that it's equal. So if you're playing the game, you know, you're doing the best you can because the position is really a computer position, not something you would expect humans to play well. Okay, he played queen d3. This defends the knight in case it gets attacked. And it also prepares queen h3, which is the more important threat, with unstoppable mate. So if it was white to move, queen h3 resigns. Okay, and black only has one move. If black doesn't play the only move, he has to resign. And he played king g7, the only move. And now, if I play queen h3, black plays rook h8. Okay. And he played the best move, g4. Now, the knight doesn't want to move because it doesn't really have a good square to move to. It can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. So the knight, you know, wants to stay on f5. Black played the only good move, bishop b7. Okay, and the idea is, as I said earlier, I want to take the knight and then take the pawn. And black's up 2 pawns. And the tactical justification is after takes. Well, he didn't take, but let's take. I take with the e pawn. And now your knight's pinned to your rook. And if you play something like, I don't know, bishop g2, play some move, then I take, and this pawn needs to be defended. Otherwise, you're just going to be down a lot of pawns. So if you play something obvious like takes, 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 black's just completely winning. Black's up 2 pawns. Black has a better pawn structure. White's pawn structure is the worst ever. And black's king's perfectly safe. Black can play rook h8. Okay. So he didn't play this, and he correctly played rook h3. This unpins the knight. So now if it's white's turn to play, white just takes the knight, and there's no pin. So if you take back, I just move my knight away. I'm up a piece. Okay, so up until here, both players have played basically perfect, close to perfect. And black played the obvious knight h4, which is a fine move. And white played the only good move, g5, attacking the knight. And in this position, this is where the game went off the rails. So until here, I find no fault with any move. All the moves were good. And the engine said it's always equal, and you can argue with your friends whether you want to have white or black. And the assembled GMs wanted to have white. They thought it was harder for black to defend than for white to attack. Although black is a pawn up, but okay. So everybody sort of liked white, and the engine said, no, it's equal. And in this position, black only has one move that equalizes. And in these kinds of situations, if one side has to play the only move every time and it's equal, practically they're much worse because you're having to find one move every time. In this position, the move that equalizes is rook h8, defending the knight. Oh, give me the knight. And here white has more than one move where the engine says it's equal. There's queen g3 and there's f4. And there's probably other moves that are equal. And the game goes on. All 3 results are possible, etc. Now, instead of rook h8, black blundered. Now, one of the obvious moves, which loses immediately, but it's an obvious move, is knight f5. So I'll get the analysis board. Then white plays g4, and they repeat and agree to a draw. No. The reason this loses is not obvious. Okay, but you play f4, double exclam, and obviously you would like to play f takes e5. God damn. You see what I'm saying? You see what I'm saying. And the reason for f4, because it looks like it just hangs a pawn, is white finally is threatening to play rook 2 to h2 and that he's winning. He has a winning attack on the h file. Can't play rook h8 now. So after f4, the engine says white is winning. It says black has to play rook h8, and he's going to get attacked down the h file. This is a passed pawn. This pawn's hanging. My knight's coming to f6. This rook's not playing. The queen's not doing very much. And it says white is up a lot, like completely winning. And knight f5 is sort of an obvious move to me, and f4 is not. But this is a great idea, this rook to h2. Okay, so rook h8 is the only move that equalizes. He blundered. He took the knight. Oh, give me the knight. Takes. Now, you can't take this because rook takes knight. And the engine, realizing that black is completely lost, plays an engine move. It plays rook h8 and just gives away its knight because that's the best the engine can do. That's not a human move. That's the engine knows it's lost, so it's playing the least lost. That's pretty lost. So humans play knight f5. That's the human move. And now white has one move that wins, and uncharacteristically, Ding played it really quickly because Ding was playing pretty slowly this game. Probably Jan was looking at queen takes e5 check, take a pawn with check, then never play f6, takes on f6, takes on f6, and the engine says this is equal. It says all zeros, every move is all zeros. Queen h2 is all zeros, f4 is all zeros. Equal position. Probably that's what Jan was expecting, was queen takes pawn check, f6. He calculated whatever he needed to calculate, and he thought it was fine, and he's right. However, we have a better move than queen takes e5 check. We play rook d2. Finally getting the rook to doing something, and now this pawn is too strong. d7 is too strong. So I have the d7 move, and I have the mating attack, and so forth. And you're completely lost here. Now, here's the main variation, and probably this is what Jan overlooked. After rook d2, it looks like you can just play queen takes g5. And the reason you can't is funny. Thanks, Steve Condi, for subscribing. I take. Now, if you play queen f6, this is like a puzzle rush kind of tactic. Rook check wins the queen. So you have to play f6. Queen here, threatening rook h7 and rook h8 and queen h7 and so forth. And if you play rook h8, which is the engine move, I take it, and if you take back, I simply take your rook. And then I play d7, and I win. I queen, I'm up a rook. So probably Jan dismissed rook d2 because of queen g5, but he missed, this sacrifice in queening. And Ding obviously saw that, because if Ding didn't see that, then rook d2 doesn't make any sense. Then queen takes g5 is good. So Ding saw he would check and go here and win. Okay, so now black's lost. If knight takes d6, then queen takes pawn check wins the knight. The knight's hanging. And I'm going to play d7, and I'm either going to mate you or I'm going to queen or both. And black has no counterplay. What's funny is, if Gary's correct, and Jan forgot to trade on d4, we could be playing knight d4 this whole time, blocking the rook. But now with this pawn here. If these pawns are off the board, black's position actually improves because we have the d4 square. Okay, so in the game, Jan played rook h8. This loses immediately. Rook takes h8 is correct. Queen takes h8. And in this position, white missed a really nice win. And if he had played this move, the game would have ended because it's too strong. He missed the move, rook to d3. And the idea is to play rook h3, attacking the queen, queen takes e5 check, resigns. And there's basically nothing to do about that. So the engine, for example, plays this and then gives up its queen. That's the best way for black to play according to the engine. Ridiculous. But the point is, this is unstoppable. Rook h3, queen takes e5, check, winning. If you make a Yasser move, a nothing move, just to show you the variation, and then you play queen d8 and f6, it's the same deviled egg. Rook h7 check, winning the queen again. Okay, so rook d3 is like plus a million, and white would have won the game. Queen h3, rook d3 is completely winning. Instead, he played d7, which is also winning, but it's barely winning, barely a GM. Okay, rook d8's forced. White was threatening. Queen takes rook, queen takes queen, and then d8 queen, which would win a rook. So he played rook to d8. Queen takes e5 check. He doesn't want to play king g8 because that undefends his rook. He wants his rook defended when queen c7 happens. So he plays king h7. He checks, forcing the king in front of the queen, or forcing the king in front of the queen, defending the rook. Checks again, always repeat. Okay, in this position, black is probably losing, and he has to suffer. Queen f8, queen e7, and one of white's plans is just to take all these pawns and give this one up and be 3 pawns up on the queen side. That's one idea. Okay, now in this position, Jan made a move you could call a bluff, or you could say, you know, it was his best chance because he's losing if he doesn't bluff, or he thought it was perpetual and he was wrong. Okay, and that's what Jan did. He played queen h4. That's not double question mark. That's a very interesting move. Okay, now white's winning with surgical precision, which very few humans would see. Very few. And if white doesn't win in the one way that white has to win, white is no longer winning. And the one way white has to win is crazy. So I think queen h4 is an excellent try. I think it's better than just playing passively and losing. Okay, so the way to win, which is not obvious, is you take the rook. I'm on the analysis. Okay, good. Queen e4. Now, if you play bishop e2, that's just a perpetual. And if you play king d1, that's just a perpetual. Okay, so the only way to try to win is rook e2. Now queen b1 check. This is the only legal move. White's threatening to check here in queen, so black has to keep checking. Obviously, king d1 is a repetition. That doesn't win. King e1 hangs mate in 1, so that's bad. King e3 is illegal, so king d3. So by the process of elimination, Ding should have calculated to here. There's only one check. And in this position, Ding probably thought rook c2 is an absurd move, so this is a perpetual. But it turns out the absurd move wins. Now, we have two ways to play. We can check, or we can play queen takes f1 check. This is more interesting, I think. If you play this check, I play king to d2. You have one check. I go here, and my king hides on b2. So I win. You check me, I play king b2, and the game's over. Then I go queen f6 check, and I queen. So that's not interesting. So interesting is queen d1 check. Now, it turns out this move wins because we can repeat. But you have to repeat. So for example, if you don't repeat and play king e2, I have this perpetual, etc. So you have to play king e4. And probably Ding went to here and he stopped. Ding said, I might lose this. I can't play this. My king's running around like material. But turns out this is winning. After queen takes check, bishop d3, again, white's threatening queen check and queen. Knight d6 check, king e5, queen takes d3, check, queen. Now, if you're looking at this from afar, you might think white's losing because white looks like he's getting checkmated. But turns out white's not getting checkmated, and there's no perpetual. So if you play queen check or queen check, I just take and run away. So you have to play knight c4 check, king here. You have to play e5 check because there's no other check. Then king g4. Now you can check here or here. I think that's the only checks that make any sense. Doesn't matter which one. And then here there's no checks. And the game was over. And that was forced. And if Ding had done that and played that way, he would have won. And you can see as a human, you might not want to have to look that far ahead to win. If you miscalculate, you lose, or perpetual. So after queen takes rook, white's winning. If two engines were playing, white would play queen takes rook and win. And the first engine wouldn't play queen h4 because it would see that queen takes rook is winning. It's just pure calculation. It's like 12 moves ahead. It's all checks, and white wins. And, you know, Ding has 24 minutes on his clock. He doesn't want to think 15 minutes about queen takes rook, then decide it doesn't win, and then play something else. And also, you sort of trust your opponent not to give a rook away unless he actually has the perpetual. But seeing all that to the end is virtually impossible. Some of the commentators, some of the engines, some of the viewers like you, you're like, oh, that's the worst move ever, and not taking the rook is the worst move ever. And that just shows a lack of understanding of chess and how difficult it is, and how nobody can calculate those variations. And you can go on your rants. Well, Carlsen could. Ugh. Okay. So in this position, white played king d1, which stops queen here check. Now the game should be a draw, albeit briefly. Queen takes g5, king c2. And in this position, black played too passively, which is very hard to say about Jan. Jan doesn't play passively. Black should play knight h4 to go to f3, or queen h4, possibly to go to e4, or just, you know, to have the queen on an active square, hitting all of these things and defending this. Instead, he played queen e7, which is a mistake. Now white's better again. You would expect white to be better with this beautiful passed pawn. Bishop g2. The engine wants to take this knight. It wants to play bishop here and take this knight. But he played bishop g2. Now, strangely, the correct move for black is very difficult to find, and he did not find it. The correct move is knight d4 check, sacrificing a piece. Then after takes, we take this. Then we take this. Then this is hanging. And we have 3 or 4 pawns for a piece. And white's king is exposed. And the engine says, with correct play, this should be a draw. And I understand him not playing that because you don't want to give your knight away when you don't have to. So knight d4 check would be a brilliant move that equalizes. Instead, he played e5. This is a mistake. Now he played bishop e4, which is good. Now the difference, if you play knight d4 check here with the pawn on e5 instead of e6, now when I take, in the previous position, you played rook takes d7, which you have to do because if you take on d4, I have bishop c6 defending my pawn. Then I'm a piece up with my passed pawn the 7th. But now if you do this, since the pawn isn't here anymore, I just take this and win. And white's up a piece. So e5 actually prevents this knight d4 move, and bishop e4 is an excellent move. And now white is probably winning again. He played knight h6, which is a mistake. White correctly played queen takes a7. Material equality has been established. Black played knight g4. And in this position, where white should win, Ding made a terrible blunder. You can see both sides have about 17, 18 minutes left. So he had time to make a good move. He has 2 good moves here. He can play king b3. One idea is just to stop checks later. The other is to walk your king up here and win this way. And another good move is bishop c6, permanently defending the d7 pawn, which needs defense. This position, this rook is overworked. It's defending 2 pawns. So I think as a human, bishop c6 has a lot to be said for it. It defends this pawn forever. We can take on b6, etc. Bishop looks really good on c6. Instead, he blundered with bishop f3, thinking, I guess, if knight f6, then I'll play bishop here. And Jan played a brilliant move, which refutes bishop f3. And that is knight takes f2. Really nice move. Sacking a piece, but getting this passed pawn, getting this pawn, getting 3 connected passed pawns, that makes it worth it. And for the second time in the game, Ding goes from winning to equal. And this is the kind of equal where you want to have black, because white's bishop is pretty bad. Rook e2, f5, and, you know, I'm definitely taking black here. This bishop is useless. And here on move 40, as his time was running out with less than 10 seconds, he played the move queen takes b6, which is a fine move. And the idea, which escaped the commentators, was if black plays queen takes, threatening pawn takes f3 and queen d1 check, we have rook g2 threatening g6. And this position should be a draw. Otherwise, white would lose immediately. White has to play rook to g2. Okay, he played rook takes d7, queen b8, and everything leads to a draw according to the engines. The engines say all moves are draws. So he played one of them. They traded. Could play rook d2 here, which none of the commentators mentioned. The idea is if you take and take my bishop, I queen. 3 pass pawns to 1, but that one queens. And these don't. So he could have played rook d2, then black can't play rook takes and pawn takes. Black has to play something else. But he played bishop e4, which is just making the game a draw. Rook e8. Now, if I was black here, I would play for a win. But the engine says it's completely drawn. The engine says all zeros every move. If I was black, I'd play here and I'd try to win. And the engine says, no, it's a draw. And I'll actually show you, like, if I was playing an engine, if the game was agreed to a draw here, very exciting game. If I was playing the engine and I had black, okay, I would play here. That's what I would play. Okay, the engine plays rook c8. I would play here. The engine says rook takes c5 is a draw. I would play here. Rook c8. Now, there's sometimes when the rook sacrifices for the pawn, sometimes white's winning, sometimes it's a draw, and sometimes white's losing. But it seems like if the king goes down here to protect and white sacrifices his rook, white's going to be the one with winning chances because the king is so bad on g1. Now the engine says we should repeat. It says stop rook g8. And it says this is the right way of playing. It says this is also a draw. Oh, I'm sorry, rook f8 check. Then this is a draw, obviously. And if the king moves, even though this looks like either side could win, the engine says it's a draw. It calculates all the way to the end, says this is a draw too. So all roads lead to a draw. You know, because white's going to move his king and pawns up, and black's king is over here when he takes the rook, so it's not going to be too helpful. So a draw was the correct result. The engine says everything's all zeros. I would rather have black because my passed pawn is better than this passed pawn. But the engine says, nah, it's fine. It's a draw. Now, Geary, for reasons I don't understand, was looking at some crazy lines where he was doing this. Ugh. You know, then I told Geary to come to my stream at that point. When he did, I banned him. It's total nonsense. God. Okay, but I mean, you know, he tried. Trying is the first step to failure. So that was a great game where I guess Jan was never winning, ever. I don't think so. But I would have taken Jan's position several times. And Ding was completely winning if he had played rook d3 when he didn't, and then if he had played bishop c6 or king b3. He was completely winning, and then he didn't win. Time trouble, the game was super complicated, and the engines did ruin it. If engines didn't exist, they'd analyze this game for years because it was so interesting. And with engines, we just know right away when it says plus 20 and then it says equal, that somebody made a mistake. And it really was getting into plus 20 territory when he could have played rook d3. Thanks, Holyfield US. Hopefully that's the real Holyfield. Thanks for the sub. Because he does play chess. What are my thoughts on their alts being exposed on Lichess? Whoever exposed them probably should have just told them so they could get rid of it instead of telling the world. Who would you rather pick after g5? Oh, I'd rather have black in this position for sure. But the players had enough. The players knew better than I did that this was a draw. And I think he played rook e8, yeah. Obviously, you can't play rook c6 to save your pawn because then my king comes in and then I won't take black. Then I'll take white. It's probably still a draw, but there's no reason I would take black if you just play defensively. So he's going to do this, and it's going to be a draw. Anyway, that was a great game. I mean, that had a lot going on. There's probably a lot I didn't mention. I got up really early this morning at 5:30, so I did watch the commentary, and I had my own engines, and I was looking at it myself, and I had some ideas, which the engine refuted. So I know that game a little bit better than the other games because I wasn't watching it live. But that was an amazing game. Neither player should be ashamed. For like the people, the gawking rabble, like on YouTube and some of the commentators, they're like, well, game's a draw or game's a win. This match is over. It's a 1-point match. It's never not been a 1-point or even match. It's the most even match ever. Either Jan is up 1 point or it's equal. Every game is decisive except this one. All the games are fascinating. Anybody could win or lose 3 games in a row, as you can see. So the match is over when game 14 ends, or if somebody has 7.5 at game 13. But saying things like the match is over because psychologically he's crushed, I don't believe any of that nonsense. You guys believe it because you're like, every move is a blunder because my computer said so. And it makes you not understand chess at all when all you do is use the engine as a crutch. It makes you worse for your own games because now you don't have an engine, so now you just blunder every move. And then you're like, well, I blunder every move, but so did Jan. I mean, there were brilliant moves played in this game, several. Like rook d2 quickly was incredible. And Jan made a mistake with bishop takes e4. He was losing. He fought back. He found knight takes f2, confusing the commentators. Just a really great game. So this is my favorite game of the match because it was a seesaw game. There was a little time trouble for Ding at the end. And both sides had winning chances. It was unclear who was better for the first 20 moves of the game. So it was just, I mean, the game was great. Kudos to the players. Four and a half, 3.5. That's right. Anyway, I can't wait for the next game. They'll play tomorrow. Jan will have white. And the match is 4.5, 3.5. I'll see you guys tonight. Me and Karen will be doing a stream. Not sure what we'll do, but we'll do something. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And don't forget to complain. And remember to send me your address. Okay, now I'm a vegan, so we're going to rate a chicken. Tastes like chicken. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.